taking it back to Brooklyn, who do you think was your biggest influence?
One of them is a dear cousin of mine, which is Aileen. Another one was my uncle Martin, which is my father's younger brother. The best advice that I received was from Emily, who was basically saying, what's the worst that could happen?
Shout out to Miss Ruiz.
What's the worst that could happen? You fall down, get back up.
What happened?
You go broke, start over. People start over every day.
What does FMO stand for?
Contractually speaking, it is a field management organization.
Where do you see AIA in the next 10 years?
National.
Welcome to another episode of Blueprints Podcast. I'm your host, David Campo. And today's guest is Orlando Ruiz. And we're going to be talking to him today a little bit about his humble beginnings, his college career, his corporate life, and then now his entrepreneurship journey and opening up his own insurance agency and beyond. So welcome, Mr. Orlando Ruiz.
Thank you, David.
Thank you for coming on today and taking the time. I know you're a busy man.
I appreciate it, man. Anything for you.
I know we talk a lot. You know, I feel like we always have a conversation whenever we don't even intend to have a conversation. We're just
every day
watching a football game, watching a basketball game, and somehow we segue into something business related or something that's
literally, it could be a barbecue and we could be talking about how flipping a hamburger is about related to business. So every day, absolutely.
So it's always interesting to catch up with you. This is going to be similar to those conversations that we've had. Maybe dive into other things that maybe I haven't been able to ask you or you haven't shared with me. So yeah, man, let's kind of get it started in where was Orlando born and what was Orlando's upbringing like?
Orlando was born in Brooklyn, New York. That's where I'm originally from. So I'm originally from New York. My mom had 3 kids, myself and 2 younger sisters, originally from Brooklyn. We were there up until about maybe, I would say, like 7 or 8. And then from there, most of my family started to move down and migrate to Florida. My mom was part of that migration. She came down along with my grandmother. And we came down and then we lived in Florida for a few years. And we did that up until about maybe, I would say, about 12, 13 years old, as far as I can remember. And then from that, we went back to New York. And then I finished most of my high school in New York, in the Bronx. We moved back to the Bronx. And then from there, I went through high school in New York. My sisters also came along with us as well. And then attended college, went to John Jay College of Criminal Justice. Quite honestly, I went to college. I had no idea why I was going to college. I just knew I had to go to college. Asked my mom, was like, hey, what's next? And she's like, I don't know, go to school. So went to school and first year was just kind of like feeling myself out. Really got interested in the criminal justice aspect of things, law, psychology, forensics, just breaking things down has always interested me, even when I was like young as a little kid. So I went to John Jay College of Criminal Justice, and I went there for about a year. Always played basketball as well. I played basketball in high school. I was okay, not the best, but definitely a supporting cast. And then first year, didn't try out, wasn't picked up, wasn't recruited, anything like that, and just went to school. And then just during like lunch, we were sitting there playing basketball with a couple of kids, and one of the kids came out and was like, hey, did coach tell you to come by today? And I had no idea that they were doing a tryout. And they were like, yeah, we're doing a tryout for like 2 or 3 spots. So I was like, all right, why not? I got nothing else to do. And went out, I think it was my sophomore year, tried out for the basketball team, made the basketball team, which was good. It was a pretty good experience. And did that for a few months. And, typical young, kid with limited or poor direction kind of got frustrated and ended up not playing and quitting after a few games, which was probably like one of the worst decisions of my life because I would have loved to see how that would have panned out. But in that whole thing, I actually met Emily, which is my wife, and we met at school. And during that time, I was like, all right, I'm done with this. I'm not playing basketball anymore. I'm thinking about a course correction. I'm not thinking about this school anymore. I want to see if I could do something else. Right around that time, we had September 11th as well. So when we were in school, the 9/11 attacks happened. And we actually had like 2 people from our class because at that time, John Jay, if you wanted to become a police officer or a firefighter, you needed like 2 years of college. So we actually had like 2 kids, or I wouldn't say kids, they were adults because adults went to school as well. We had 2 people who actually were part of like the firefighting team and emergency response pass away in 9/11. So, that was a very, very somber moment while all those things were going on. And at that time, I was like, you know what? I don't know, maybe I want to try something different, maybe business management. So then I go down and I
Wait,
reach
wait.
out.
So your initial path was going to be to be in law enforcement or a firefighter?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, it was either going to be corrections. It was either going to be. I had some friends that were police officers, and they were telling me about how much money they were making, and I was like, all right, I guess I'll give this a shot
That's
somehow.
interesting. I
Yeah,
didn't know.
yeah. So then once 9/11 happened, I was like, hey, you know what? Maybe I want to do something different. And so I went down to the guidance counselor, and I asked the guidance counselor, I was like, hey, if I want to transfer to like business management, like how would that work? And she was like, essentially, you'd be starting over because the first 2 years that you took were all core classes. So they're all law, psychology, ethics, morality, all these forensics. Like none of that's going to apply. Those credits aren't going to apply for business management because when I thought I was like, I'm going to take my hardest classes freshman and sophomore year and then coast junior and senior year and take like the basic courses. So that backfired on me. And I was like, man, I'm literally going to have to start all over. So I decided to move down to Florida on a whim. Literally, I got in my car, filled it with gas, packed my clothes up, and drove down here with my grandmother. And once I came down, I had a little bit of a long distance relationship with Emily. And then at that time, she decided to come down. And then we found an apartment, started getting some jobs here and there, and just kind of like figured my way out and kind of figure out how things were going in Florida. Florida was a much different place back in that time. I got involved in insurance when it comes to health insurance specifically. I've always had a relative in the industry. I never really knew what he did or how he did it. I just knew when it came to these things, he was very, very crafty, and it interests me. And it was Martin. And Martin actually used to work. He was one of the pioneers of like Medicare Advantage when it first started way back in like the early 90s. And he used to work for an insurance company. And he goes, hey, look, I'm leaving this insurance company, a big insurance company. I'm going to go work for a smaller one that's up and coming right now. I think you should probably come over there, leave what you're doing and come over there and join us. And I was like, I'm not too sure, man. So I went on a ride along with him. He's like, why don't you come with me? And I was like, wow, that's pretty cool, man. He explained, how he's able to like help someone sign up for health insurance, and he's able to get them all these different types of products and help them with their medications, and they have coverage for this and coverage for that. And I'm like, so who's paying for all of this? Like, who's paying for all of this? And he goes, it's the government. And I'm like, so then why doesn't everybody sign up for this? How much is it? He goes, there's no cost. They don't pay anything for it. And I go, that's it? He goes, yeah. I'm like, this is way easier than what I'm doing right now, man. So I went out, applied for the position, worked for a company. This was back in like 2007, 2008. Applied for a position, and everyone in there was like 20 to 25 years my senior. I was literally the youngest person. I think I was like 23, 24 at the time. And I remember my job interview, the person who's interviewing me was literally like, yeah, I don't think you're going to be a fit here. And I'm like, okay, well, this is an interesting interview, but since I'm here, let's have a conversation. And he did not want to hire me. He was like, no, I don't think you're going to work here. And the door was open to the room that we were interviewing in. And another gentleman overheard me talking and was like, hey, look, if you don't want the guy, I'll take him. And he ended up hiring me for the position, which is pretty ironic because I ended up being the #1 agent in the country after 3 years. I worked there from about 2007, 2008. I left a little bit. There was a person who decided to leave the organization and start their own FMO. I left with that person and helped them grow that. And it did well. Quite honestly, I think it was a little bit too premature. The industry was very, very new. It was very hard to crack into the industry. There weren't that many brokers. People weren't doing Medicare brokerages like that. And quite honestly, just from a financial aspect, it was not enough for him to like maintain all of that. And I said, look, as much as I love helping you grow this here, I just don't see the viability behind it right now. And then WellCare at that point, which is the company I was working for, was recruiting me and saying, hey, look, come back, So I ended up going back to the company back in like 2010. I ended up being the district sales manager. So I was like the broker manager there for maybe about 2 years. I went from like Jacksonville all the way down to Miami. I saw how different markets worked. And a lot of agents were like, man, you should really like look into opening up like your own agency or your own FMO. So I spoke with Emily and I said, look, I think I want to walk away from a very, very high paying position to not make any money for 3 years, grow a business, pour all my time and energy into it for a possibility of success. What do you think? And she was like, it's a tall order, but if you think we can do it, let's do it. And she's been riding with me day one, which has always been monumental in our growth. And so we started Advantage Insurance Advisors back in 2018. And in 2018, we had just a handful of agents. And the idea was to grow an FMO. Well, how do you grow an FMO in a very competitive market? Because, insurance companies just won't hand out contracts to anyone, right? Like, it's just not something where you could just like knock on a door and be like, I want an FMO contract. We really had to prove ourselves financially, from a business perspective, overview, capital, compliance, everything that you can think of, things that we didn't even think of that we needed to have at that point. We needed to make sure that we needed to implement and adopt. And then we also needed to compete with everyone else that was around here. So, 2018 was like the first year that we started. That AEP was a little bit of a slow AEP because I think we opened up, I would say maybe like around April or May of 2018. So the paint wasn't even dry on some of these offices that we created for AEP. So it was kind of like our starter AEP. 2019 came around. We started to get a good run. Agents, I wasn't actively recruiting other people, but they came to us and I kind of let them do that on their own organically. And 2019, we started to get like a good ramp up. And I was like, wow, that was awesome. We opened up another 2 locations. And before you know it, we're adding people. I think right around that time, you also came on board as well. And we ended up, bringing you on as well. And then a couple of other people, just by gravity, things were happening. We opened up a couple of more locations, the 3rd and 4th location. And, we did a ribbon cutting like January of 2020. Everything's great. We cut the ribbon. And then in February, it's like national shutdown. And it's like, did you hear about these people getting sick and having COVID? So COVID hit in February of 2020, the national shutdown. We shut down, the whole world shut down. And then we opened up a few months later because we were designated as an essential business. We had to, right? And at that time now, we have 4 locations. We sign leases on all of these places. We have agents that can't go out and write business because they're told if you go out and you're going to get sick and die. Same thing with our clients. They're elderly and, it was affecting them dramatically. So it was a little bit of a standstill for us. So at that time, I go, wow, I just left a corporate position where I could have excelled and God knows where I would have ended up to put all my chips in. We're not going to make any money for 2020, but let's build relationships. And that's what we did. We did food pantries. We did drives. We shook hands with people that we needed to shake hands to. We did everything we possibly could. We helped everyone we tried to help. And then when things started to loosen up a little bit and things started to go back to normal, organizations, companies, and people remember we were the ones out there when no one else was, and we were the ones out there when we knew we weren't going to get paid a dime to do so. And I think that helped us out a lot. And then that helped us coming out of 2020. And man, since 2020 up until now, it has been lights out. We have been growing, adding new people. We're super fortunate. Things have been going very, very well for the company. And it's just a testament of the type of people that we bring on, the culture that we try to instill with everybody that we work with. We seem to be gelling with a certain class of individuals that like to excel, that like to learn, that want to be professional, that want to grow in this industry. And we're super thankful and appreciative of all the people that we've brought on board and continue to keep bringing on board as we do so moving into the future. So, yeah.
That's lots to unpack there, man.
Yeah, man.
I got a lot of questions. So let's go back to your upbringing. Like, how was living in Brooklyn? Because I know back then where you grew up, 80s baby, Brooklyn is not the Brooklyn that it is now. So Brooklyn was a very, very different place back in 1985, I believe, right?
Right.
Than it is now in 2026. So walk us through what was a typical day in Brooklyn.
Yeah, no, I think Brooklyn was very interesting. And you look back at it, and I guess when you go through those types of things, you don't know what's happening when it's happening. But then when you're smart enough, you can kind of put pieces together. Brooklyn was a very, very tough place to grow up in. I can tell you that. Drugs were running rampant. Crime was running rampant. Where we wasn't the best of locations. And it happens, But Brooklyn, obviously, now everybody wants to live in Brooklyn. I mean, it's a beautiful place to live. It's definitely been changed over the years. And it's super expensive to live there now, by the way. But back then, you couldn't give it away. But where we were, you would go to public school and there would be fights and, you'd walk to school and, at that time you would be kicking rocks and, when you were younger, you'd just be kicking things on the way to school. But looking back at it, what you were kicking were like crack vials because they were different color tops, So at that time, you're like stepping on them and crushing them as a kid, having fun. And your parents are like, don't do that. And then you look back and you go, oh, that's what that was, right? Or, you would see people sleeping next to a payphone or, somebody on the phone. It's like, oh, they're just sleeping. I was like, no, they're on drugs, and it's unfortunate to kind of grow up with those things. And I feel like those things helped us grow a lot faster. When you live in New York, I always say this, living in New York has its great and it also has its not so great. Its great is that you get exposed to a lot of things and you mature and you grow up a lot faster than maybe other parts of the world. The not so great part is that, that comes at a price. I've known friends that have been shot. I've had people that passed away, and at a very, very young age, in high school and in their teenage years, and being in the wrong place at the wrong time. So those random things could happen to any one of those kids. So those are things that are. It's good because you grow up fast and you learn and you get like real quick, and you're cunning and you're agile mentally and also understanding situations. And I always have this thing where I say, like adapt to your surroundings, or have situational awareness. People from New York have situational awareness.
Oh, 100%.
Right? But it comes at a price. So you kind of have to ask yourself, like, is it worth, growing up in that environment for that? And so, that's for, anyone's opinion to kind of decide what they want to do on that one. But definitely interesting upbringing for sure.
Were you a good student? Did you like get a scholarship to go to John Jay?
No.
How did that transpire from?
I was always a good student. Not to say that I was like intellectually smart. I just knew that I had to finish school. So it was like a task,
It was your job.
Yeah, it was like a job for me, right? So I looked at it as like for senior year, I think I had like maybe 2 classes or 3 classes. I tried to finish high school in 3 years and I missed it by like 12 credits. So for senior year, I had like 2 classes, and then I had lunch third period, and I was out by like 10 in the morning. Not because I was smart. I just knew I had to finish up all this school so I can get a job, right? And so my senior year comprised of, finishing up class, going to work, and then trying to make money, right? So I consider myself intelligent, but intelligent to the aspect of these tasks need to be completed. So let's finish them because we got the other task of generating money, and unfortunately, in the way I grew up, finances were very, very tough. Income was very, very tough. So I needed a job. So for me, high school was like a task to complete. So yeah, it was like, okay, what do I need to get out of here? All right, I need 90s or better to do this, and the other. Okay, then we'll get 90s, and that's what we need to do, and we'll make it happen. So yeah, high school was pretty interesting. I ended up going to school at John Jay. I was 17, turning 18, going into college. But I wanted to be 16, turning 17, going to college so that I could finish that up. So I've always been a big proponent of like, I don't know, I read this, if you ever read this book, it's called Eat That Frog. Proper planning prevents poor performance.
Oh, yeah.
So for me, yeah, for sure, absolutely. For me, I'm always thinking if there's 100 tasks, let's take care of like the top 10 most important ones that are the hardest to do. And then like the other 90 are going to be easy for us to finish, but we have to finish our task. High school was a task.
So at 16, like what gave you that foresight to be like, I need to be task oriented, and this is what needs to be completed, and this is how I need to complete it? Because given your environment, I would assume that a lot of your peers were not on the same level that you were when it came to handling your tasks.
Yeah, I guess desperation breeds ingenuity, right? So, in desperate times, people have to get creative, right? In desperate times, people have to like actually start to think about what they need to do in order for it to get done. So, growing up, I had great friends. We would always go out. Not like now. Now it's a little bit different how kids grow up. The upbringing is a little bit different. But back then, it was go outside, play all day, meet a bunch of people, come back home. So I definitely got exposed to a lot of people. I got exposed to a lot of friends, good and bad. I also got exposed to a lot of environments, good and bad. Places to say, let me go over there and learn more. Places to say, let's not cross that street and go over there after this time. So it was always an experience growing up that way. But when it comes to like trying to figure out to do better or wanting to do better, I've always had that since I was younger. I've always saw 2 scenarios and said, okay, we can either do this or do this. And if I saw that had a better outcome, I was always able to see that even at a young age to say, if you did A, B, C, D, E, F would come right after, right? And a lot of people don't think that way. A lot of people, if they're in a different upbringing or if they're in a mindset, they'd like to stay comfortable. I never like staying comfortable. If they're in a mindset where, they want to be in a certain place and they're comfortable just doing the bad things all the time, that never stuck with me. I always felt like if we could do better as an individual and there's ways to figure out how to do better, like let's go ahead and do that. Like whatever it takes to do that, let's try to figure that out because clearly, and this is something that the insurance game I think has definitely helped me in, you can agree as well, we have a window like into the future. Like when we deal, like, there are certain scenarios where we deal with people who have Medicare by way of a disability, and it's unfortunate, and we try to help them. But for the most part, we're dealing with people that are like over the age of like 65, right? So they're like 20, 30 years older than me. And when I was 23, 24, I was helping out people 75 years old. That's a 50-year advancement that I have to sit down. And when I would sit down with people, I would help them, but I would also learn from them. And, sitting down across someone who invested early, saved, didn't squander, did this, did that, and then look into his house and go, wow, or her house and be like, wow, you guys like really did it. You made it. You made it. Congratulations. To see what that looked like, that's a very, very humbling position to be in. The opposite side also exists where we sit down and we're able to sit down and see somebody 50 years ahead into the future and see what happens when you don't take care of yourself. What happens when you don't eat right, when you don't exercise, when you don't treat your family the way you need to be treating your family, when you don't save, and then see what the outcome is of that to go, yeah, I need to start making these changes now. So to be honest with you, in hindsight, insurance, although a very rewarding position to be in financially, is a very humbling position to be in because it allows you to see like into the future. Every day that we sit down, people are opening up their lives to us and within an hour or two, and we're supposed to try to figure out how to navigate that. Imagine doing that, like 4 or 5 times a day for like 5 years. If you don't learn from that, then I don't know what's going to teach you at that point.
Yeah, I think what we do, like you said, gives us that insight. So it's like having a blueprint to like, all right, which side of the fence do I want to be on? That's a very interesting point. Now, you're at John Jay. You said you decided to kind of go to get your business degree, right? You ended up getting your business degree?
No, unfortunately, I never did. No. So when I moved to Florida, at that time I was thinking about going back to school, and I started to like pick up odd jobs here and there. I worked for a couple of companies, and then in one of those companies, someone put me on to getting my real estate license. I was like, you know what? I'll give it a shot, and if this doesn't work out, I'll go back to school. And then that kind of led me on a trajectory that was a little bit different. And then from there, that led me to the next stage, which is the health insurance license. Oh. And for the past 18 years, it has been a blur in the healthcare industry. Just one thing after another. I think we were just, even before jumping on this podcast here, we got hit with a phone call that's going to have to make us pivot again, right? So I never got a chance to go back to school. That was always one thing I wanted to see if I can complete. Yeah.
Man. So because I worked for Westgate as well. I don't know if, I think I mentioned it to you in the past. And so I did the timeshare out as well. What did Westgate teach you about sales that you didn't know prior? Because their training was always one of their best trainings out of the timeshare industry, period. I don't know if it's still to this day, but back when we were there, it definitely was.
Yeah, no. So, say what you say about timeshare, and, it's high pressure, high sales tactics, things of that nature. And yes, to a certain degree, I can understand where you're coming from. We worked in a different department. We worked with, existing clients who were looking to, either upgrade or change or swap some things out. So, but in any case, one of the biggest things that I learned from that is just how to transfer your emotions of what you want to have done onto someone else. That is an art form in itself. Presenting, tone, voice inflection, pace, eye contact, connection, body language. These are all things that we do subconsciously, whether you know it or not. And there is an art form to it. And the fact that there's actually, I wish they would teach that more in school.
Oh yeah.
That's a book that I have my kids on the weekends. I have a body language book, and each and every one of them, as much as they hate standing up in front of me and reading it, they have to read a chapter. And it's like, what happens when you do this? Or what happens when you do this, right? And it's important because these are things that I feel like are missing out of like the school curriculum, because that's real world scenario stuff, 100%. Right? That and like finance. But that helped a lot because that teaches you an entire dynamic of like social communication. And that's all sales is a transfer of emotion. I'm sitting here, you're sitting there. And at the end of the day, my objective is to get you to do something so that you can see it makes sense. So I struck well with very analytical people. I was never very good with like the high impulse people, right? And I did that for a short period of time, but I picked up a lot of sales techniques and trainings and body language and voice inflection and tonality. And that I took with me to like my next position.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So now you transition out of Westgate. Now you're going into work with your uncle at WellCare. What was the biggest obstacle that you faced in that transition, or was there an obstacle?
The biggest obstacle was youth and inexperience. That was the biggest obstacle. I was, like I said, the average insurance agent was like 50, right? That was like their age, right? And here I am, 23, 24. So for me, youth, obviously, when you're presenting, and this happens to a lot of the younger agents as well, when you're going into someone's house and you're talking about health insurance and covering cancers and infusions and therapies and surgeries and medications, someone that's 50 or 60 years older than you may come with a preconceived notion that you don't have any experience in this because of your youth.
Of course.
So you have to make your skills that much more stronger to outshine the fact that you're younger, right? I just had to beat that with skill. I got it to a point where the company used to do sales presentations, and back then we would have these flip charts. And I made it a point to memorize that chart by heart, to where a point where we were at a sales presentation and we had like an A rep presenter and then the B rep would assist. The B rep came up to me and was like, "You really like memorize the entire thing?" And I go, "Yeah, absolutely."
At that point in time, you were just trying to make ends meet, or did you see that was going to be a career that you were going to do for the next 18 years?
I definitely saw it was a career. I didn't know where it was going to end up. It was like taking a highway and there's multiple exits. You could take an exit and get off at this city. You could take an exit and get off the other city. But I knew I had to be on the highway. I knew that corporate structure was definitely something that would allow me to grow within the organization. And I did. I went from like a regular agent first year trying to figure it out. Second year, I felt like I kind of got my reins. And then I believe either the second or the third year, I was the number one agent in the state of Florida. And at that time, we had maybe like 200 agents in the state. And then the following year, I followed it up with being the number one agent in the entire U.S., in the entire like United States of America. It was like 7,000, 8,000 agents at that time. And that just all had to do with networking, not packing it in at 5 o'clock, working extended hours. But I knew it was a career. I didn't know it was going to plateau. And at that point, when an opportunity presented itself, I decided to walk away from being like a broker, or not a broker, but an agent for the company, and help start an FMO. So I thought I would have kept growing and kept going up the ladder. But when the opportunity presented itself, it was a new challenge. And I was like, hey, why not? And it was fun. It was exciting starting off that way. And quite honestly, it kind of gave me the bearings of like when I wanted to do it on my own and say, okay, I've been in this room before. I know what it is to, work off of a bare bones budget. But if we do it a certain way, I feel like we would be able to definitely grow. So I saw a little bit of it in prior to me actually walking out on 2018 and doing it for myself. But I always felt like it was a career move. The residual aspect of it always intrigued me. There's very few industries where you can make residual income like this, right? So hopefully it stays that way. Insurance companies, let's not change anything. But the fact that you receive residual income was always an attractive component. It's either that or you're an artist or an entertainer or a musician or an actor or an actress or an insurance agent in some sort of aspect. And I'm pretty sure there's other industries out there that offer residual income, but this one attracted me. Yeah.
What is, for the people who don't know, what does FMO stand for and what does it mean?
FMO is an interchangeable word. There's so many different, in our industry, we love confusing people with, acronyms. So an FMO is supposed to stand, contractually speaking, it is a field management organization. That's what it stands for. Or a field marketing organization, right? But we're not just a marketing organization. A marketing organization would be someone who just helps advertise or helps do marketing. There is so much more that we do. Management, compliance, access to systems, and the list goes on and on and on, right? Mentorship, things like that. So we're a field management organization, which basically means that we have a contract directly with the insurance companies. Another acronym that we can throw out there, because there are some people that say that they are FMOs, which is great, but we are what's called a TOH, or a top of hierarchy, which means we are contracted directly with every insurance company. There's nobody in between us and our contracts. And that's okay. There are certain organizations that are downlines of downlines, right? But we are directly contracted with the insurance company. So that's what a FMO or a TOH stands for, right? Dana White says it best. There's like a social media clip that he did, and he was like, everybody wants to be an entrepreneur. They want to say that they make their own hours. And it's like, you don't want to be an entrepreneur. Yep. An entrepreneur is nonstop every day. When there's a problem, if the toilet breaks, you fix it. If it's payroll, you take care of it. Every problem that could come up with a business is your responsibility.
Speaking of broken toilets, there was a window in there, and I know this because I've known you for a long time, where you and Emily were flipping houses.
Yes, that is true.
So talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah. So in addition to selling insurance from like 9 to 6 or whatever we stopped doing insurance, we also flipped houses in the evening as well. So from like 9 till 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, I would be flipping houses. A crazy idea. I got involved in it right around a time where there was an opportunity. This was back like in like 2000, I don't know, 2008 to 2012. That was right during the recession and the housing crisis came around, and there was really good opportunities at that time. And I was like, okay, let's try to see if we could figure this one out. And Emily and I, since I still have my real estate license, I still dabbled in the real estate industry. But yeah, we flipped residential properties, and it was Emily and I, like literally, like doing all of the painting, all the construction, all the carpentry work, and we used to flip houses. Into the wee bit of the night. So that was a stretch of my life. Yeah. I don't know if I'll be able to do that now because I was younger, so I had a lot more. I was a lot more vibrant. But we flipped quite a few houses, and then we just took that money and bankrolled that, and then helped AIA get started. Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Shout out to all the guys that lay down grass, that hang up cabinets, that cut down trees.
Yeah.
Because that's something that was not for me, man. I'll never forget. Can you give us a story of one of the times that you failed and you kind of reflected on it and you said, man, do I really want to continue down this path?
Yeah, no, for sure. I think there have been a couple of relationships that I tried to foster in culture to come into the organization. And one of the biggest things that I have is I tend to believe people that they could do anything because I feel like I can do it too, right? So for me, in my mind, I go, yeah, sure, absolutely, let's do it, right? And sometimes the commitment isn't there from the other person as much as mine is to them as they are to us. So there have been a couple of relationships in the past that I failed at that I need to do a better job of, trying to see if I can foster a better relationship and a commitment on their end. And it is to each his own. Everybody's going to do what they want to do and how they want to do it, and that's okay. But there have been a couple of failures in there where, you trial by error. And you don't know until you figure it out, but you learn from it, and you hedge your bets on the next one, and you try to minimize risk, and it's a learning curve as you come along, right? That's just how it is. Yeah.
So you've always been, since I've known you, you've been a very dribbling individual. You're always looking, to do something to make a change, right? I know you would attribute that to how you were raised and your upbringing, right? But if your upbringing changed in any form or fashion, do you think you would have the same drive and the same being task oriented as you are now?
I don't know, right? It's one of those things where it's like shoulda, coulda, woulda, right? And hindsight's always 20/20, right? So you look back at certain things and go, if this didn't happen, or if this did happen, would I end up being where I am now? It's hard to say that, It's hard to say that. One of the biggest things for me, I should say, is that if I don't meet my wife in school and she comes and she doesn't follow me, does the path that I have come down to where I am now still happen? And the answer is no, right? Like my kids don't happen, the business doesn't happen. So that was like I don't know what they call it in a movie, but like the arc in the storyline. Like if that sequence doesn't happen, then yes, I can look at you firmly and say, I wouldn't be where I am right now. All of the other stuff, I think you're wired a certain way from when you're born. But I do think that certain paths over time, if things don't happen or if things do happen, could change, right, to a certain degree. And I think meeting my wife, Emily, was probably like one of the biggest like paths or course corrections to say, if that doesn't happen, will I still be here? And the answer will probably be, yeah, absolutely not.
Back then, taking it back to Brooklyn, who do you think was your biggest influence that gave you the train of thought or like, the traits that you have? Was it a family member? Was it somebody that you saw, somebody in the neighborhood?
I think there's two people. Actually, there's three people. There's two people in one scenario that I think we talked about this earlier, where it was like, hey, growing up in there, why did you feel like, that you can think a different way or do this, that, and the other? I saw how it was, and then I also caught a glimpse of how it could be, right? And I think they always say, in order for you to appreciate like joy, you have to go through pain. In order for you to appreciate happiness, you have to know what sorrow is, right? So everything has like its polar opposite, the yin and the yang. So I saw where I was from, and unless I see where it could be, I'll never know what's on the other side of that coin or the light at the end of the tunnel. And I think so the scenario of how I grew up is like what it was and where I came from. And then there were two people that I felt like had a lot to do with where it could go or what life could be. One of them is a dear friend of mine, a dear cousin of mine, which is Aileen. Aileen was always like a trailblazer. She was like the first one with like a good job. She was the first one to like have this or have that. So I always looked. She was the first one to like own a home that I knew at a young age, right? So for me, I always looked up to her as like that's what it could be. Like I see it, right? You can see it. Another one was my uncle Martin, which is my father's younger brother, and he moved down to Florida at a very very young age, and we would see him from time to time. And then I reconnected with him in my later years, and he was another person as well of what it could be. He owned his own home. I looked at his daughters as one of the first people that I saw that had a mom and dad living in the home, because I grew up in a single parent household, right, with just my mother. My father wasn't around. So seeing those things, it was like, oh, that's what it could be, right? So I would say that those two people would probably be like one of the most influential people compared. And then my environment of where I grew up showed me what it was, and those two show me what it could be. Yeah.
That's very good. Shout out to Aileen and
That's right.
Uncle Martin.
For sure.
So now going back to WellCare, when did you figure out that, okay, my time is done here, I need to transition out of here, and I need to, set this thing ablaze? Because I know that conversation with your spouse, with Emily, like how did she take that, knowing that you were going to go from a pretty well-paying corporate position to, like you mentioned earlier, we're probably, going to be on a ramen noodle diet for the next couple of years?
Yeah, so I saw that the industry was changing. I saw that new companies were coming into the market. This area was predominantly run by like 5 companies for probably about 15 years, right? Up until about maybe 2000, I would say 2013. And then other companies started to come into play. Some of them have gone out of business. Just as quickly as they came, they have exited. But in 2017 and 2016, it gave me an opportunity to meet with all of the field agents all the way from like Pensacola down to Miami. And I saw that they had an allegiance, and it wasn't to the plan, it was to their clients, their clientele. Whereas as an employee, your allegiance is to your carrier, right? So if you have a product that's great, that's easy to sell. If you have a product that's not so great, your allegiance is still to the carrier. You still have to push that product whether you like it or not. And in certain places, it makes sense. And in other places, I literally would tell people, hey, look, as much as I would love to put you on this product, I think what you have is probably better than what I can offer. If I'm in an area where our plan isn't competitive, why am I banging my head against a wall here trying to make something happen, right? Let's go where we're good at. But I built a lot of really good relationships, and that helps me throughout my career. But when I saw that the agents, the brokers, the field brokers had the allegiance to their clientele, I saw that new companies were coming into the market, which is going to dilute the market share of some of the other companies that were here. I also saw that at any moment in time, companies can shift their benefit strategy out of my control. That's out of my hands, right? What can we say about that or do about that? And then the other thing is that, brokers don't have to sell your product. They can go sell something else out there. I saw what worked and what didn't work. And then now coming around, I said, okay, let me do it my way and see if I can figure out this. And I felt like in about 5 or 7 years, where would we be versus me staying here? Where would I be? And could that work for us? And I spoke to Emily and I said, hey, look, here, I laid it out just like I laid it out to you with some other details. And she's always been, that's one thing that I can tell you about Emily, man. There's very few people that are built like her. She would run through a brick wall for me if she needed to. So when she said, hey, look, if you think we can do this, I'm here. I think if you notice in our industry, there's a lot of husband and wife scenarios. And I think there's some testament to that because, shout out to everybody who, is working with their significant others, because what you come home and you go, how was your day? You know how my day was if you're doing it. And when I laid it out to her, she was like, yeah, I think this makes sense. I think you can make it work. If we can make this work and we can keep doing it and just outwork everybody over time, the results will come. Over time, the results will come. And we weren't like a fly-by-night situation. We didn't just blow up out of anywhere within 2 years. It was a slow, methodical, systematic growth that we've had that has been able to put us where we are. But the cool thing about that is that, we have longevity. There's a lot of people out there that will promise you the sun, moon, and stars. And I see these people and I go, so how'd it go? And they're like, oh, not so well, and it's like, 90% of what I was told didn't happen. And I was like, well, that's because you didn't want to hear how I told you. I'm very black and white. Some people like that. Some people don't. But at least I know when I walk out of my meetings, that there's no gray in between. And, it like I told you before earlier, it sticks to certain kind of people.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's been great, man. It's been a cool ride.
Yeah. I think I appreciate the transparency, and I kind of have the same dealings with that because I've ran across some people that I try to, recruit for my agency, and they're like, well, that was a terrible pitch. And I was like, what do you mean it's terrible? Like, that's not what I heard from this company. And this company.
Right,
I'm
right.
like, I'm not here to pitch you, man. I'm here to lay it to you straight.
Right,
And you
right.
decide if that's a good move for you and your family or not.
We've had a lot of boomerang brokers, believe it or not, agent, brokers that have
That's a good term, boomerang.
brokers that have like shopped us around,
Yeah.
and it was like, oh, I'm meeting with you and I'm meeting with somebody else, and I'm like, okay, cool. And they'll meet with me, and then they'll meet with someone else, and then they'll say, oh, I decided to go somewhere else. I'm like, all right, cool. And then like a year, they're like, hey, so how do I like get with you now? And we've had quite a few people, some really good rock stars for our organization who we tried to get in the beginning, and for whatever reason they decided to go somewhere else. And now they're with us and they haven't gone anywhere because it's kind of like, okay, I've heard the stories and the glitz and the glamour, and now I'm working with an organization that's like giving it to me straight. I prefer that now, right? But unless you've gone through it, it's kind of hard for me to kind of explain it to you. So, but we've had quite a few, believe it or not, boomerang brokers that are now with us, and they've been with us for years now too.
I mean, I can imagine. I didn't have a taste of being a captive agent working for, a carrier like you did with WellCare. I didn't have experience to work with any other FMO or downline agency, so I've only worked, under AIA the whole entire time. So whenever I hear these stories, I'm just like, man, there's people like that out there really in this industry? And then you start to question everybody's validity because they would just say anything or do anything to either get an application and enroll in a client or get an agent. And then when the client gets screwed over, or the agent gets screwed over, they just on to the next.
Yeah.
And so that's never been my experience with you or with other agents that I've talked to that have, worked for.
Yeah, no, we got a
the
solid
FMO.
team, and we got a solid team, and we're very appreciative of it. And but even with you on your end, you've kind of seen how we've been able to work, and you've been able to mature and grow as well. So on your end, what are your thoughts about how you started? Because I remember when you started, you came out, and I don't want to turn this around on you, but there was a time where I think you were looking into like the financial sector, and I was like, all right, man, well, I'm starting an FMO.
Yeah.
And, I was like, come back to me if you ever want to start doing some stuff with us. And I think a year went by or so, maybe a little bit less. And you were
it was probably about 7 months.
yeah, it was something like that. And you were like, hey, so, how about this whole Medicare thing? But I mean, that David versus the David that's here today, completely two different people, right? So how did that trajectory go, and how did that work out for you?
So I tried to get my Series 7 license. And in order to get your Series 7 license, you have to have your 215 license.
Got it. Okay.
So to be honest with you, I don't even recall why I got my 215. I feel like somebody was trying to sell me life insurance or something. They were like, oh, you should do this.
Yeah, yeah.
And I said, okay. Like I was in license mode and I had my real estate license. And then I was like, let me just get the 215 and figure it out. Then I spoke to one of my buddies. He's in finance. And I was like, hey, man, I know you're in finance. I got my 215. Like, what should I do next? What should I explore? Because I don't want to do life insurance. And he was like, you should go check out this company I'm working for. And I said, cool. I'm like, all right, I'll check. I'm open to it. I had nothing to lose at that point, right? I was waiting tables. And so let me roll the dice and figure this out. Got interviewed. The guy loved me. Go to the class. I was the only one in the class without a finance degree, which said a lot because I never got a degree, right?
Right.
But we were all in the same position, do the same exact thing. So long story short, 3 months passed. I sit for the Series 7 exam, 6-hour test. I fail it. And it was during this time that you opened up the FMO. And I remember you took an interest in like, hey, did you pass the Series 7 exam? And then after I failed the exam, that's when you were like, hey, you try some Medicare? And I was like, I'm applying to some other brokerages. I'll get back to you. And then when I started thinking about the process, so, for those people who don't know about what the process for the Series 7 is, you have to be sponsored under a brokerage. You can't just, like the real estate exam, take the class, you get your fingerprints, you sit for the state test, and that's it. But for the same thing for the 215, for the Series 7, you have to be sponsored. You can't just walk into a testing center and say, hey, I'm here to take the exam. So it was a process. It was already a 3-month process that I went without collecting a paycheck. So to start again, JP Morgan or with Charles Schwab, it wasn't something I wanted to do. I needed money now, and that's when I approached you and you told me what it was. And I still remember we sat down and you trained me for like 6 hours. And out of those 6 hours, all I remember was A and B.
This is a pretty cool part of the industry. This is what I really do like about it, is that anyone can show up and we're all like equal at the starting line, right? And you'll be surprised the people that end up finishing first or second, right? And and quite honestly, man, I will take someone who is like hungry, who is willing to learn, who wants to grow as an individual and as a professional any day off the street, because those are things you can't teach.
Yeah,
you can't
correct.
teach those types of drivers, right? You're either built with that or you're not. But it's interesting because anybody with a license can start a race, right? But it's those types of people that end up like finishing the race. The fact that you can do this quick, you put that with like a drive mentality, that's a scary individual, man. That's a scary, and I love seeing those types of scenarios come to fruition. But that's a part that I do like about this industry, is that everybody has a fair shot to like hit a home run.
1,000%.
So shout out to everyone who's able to do that and make it work from the very, very beginning. But then you see those people that have that drive, that hunger. The ones that like really, really excel are the ones that eliminate like all distractions and just focus on their craft. The ones that separate themselves and have a driver are the ones that also eliminate like distractions. And sometimes distractions can be friends. Your friend group that you're with could be a distraction from you hitting that next level. So you have to make a tough decision and say, you know what, I may have to eliminate myself out of this friend group for the sake of the cause, right? It could be family. As unfortunate as it is, there could be some family that you may have to eliminate out of your circle in order for you to get to that next level. It could be your social habits, where you go, who you hang with, and what you occupy your off hours with, right? In order for you to be an expert in a craft, you got to put 10,000 hours into it, right? And you could do 10,000 hours in 4 years. You could do 10,000 hours in 40 years, right? So if you can compress that time by eliminating distractions, keep staying hungry, focusing on what you need to be focusing on, you'll get to where you need to get to. You just got to outwork everybody.
Yeah. I think I became pretty good at it. And to be honest with you, I surprised myself because when I got my 215, like I said, I had no idea really what I wanted to do with it. I was just open to suggestions because I just didn't know any better. I just got my license because I figured, I'm like, all right, I don't got a degree. So any other certification or license that I can get can maybe improve my chances of doing something. At the moment, I didn't know what.
Right. So you went from waiting tables to where you are now.
Yeah, I mean, but I was still waiting tables when I started. And I don't know if you remember, but the bill still needed to be paid. But the reason why I stuck with it is because, like, I don't know, I wasn't doing anything else that was going to be as productive. And then the residual component, and when I saw that first residual check after the first year, even though it wasn't crazy, I was like, oh, this is real, because you believe it, right? And I know you weren't lying to me when you told me, oh, this is residual income, and I was like, all right, it sounds good, but it's at that point it was kind of like a theory or an idea that you like think about, but until you saw like the proof in the check,
right?
You were like, oh crap, if I just multiply this by 2, then that 2 I multiplied again by 2, and then again by 2. Wow, I can do pretty well for myself, and then I can leave the restaurant industry altogether. And then what got me out was the pandemic. When that hit, the restaurant that I was working at shut down.
That is true.
And
right.
at that point, my residuals were just enough for me to get by.
Isn't that something?
I was just like, man, like that's crazy. So I picked a good time to start.
Imagine if that wasn't there, right? If you didn't have that residual income.
What would have happened? So, I'm married. At that point we had 2 kids, and had I not had that, I was like, what was I going to do? Because I didn't have really anything to fall back on. You know what I'm saying? And so I say all that to say the people who I think have or create a big obstacle as like kind of like the point of entry to get to this. It's like, you can do it. Like I did it and I had a family. I was a breadwinner. You know what I'm saying? So if I could do it, you can figure it out. It's just you got to be willing and able to sacrifice what you need to sacrifice. And that's, time, like you said, with your friends, partying, trying to, be smart with your money, not spending it on dumb stuff. All those things need to be done in order for you to be able to have that vision and see like, all right, cool. In 2 years, 3 years, I can be here.
Right.
But I need to change this in order for that to change in 3 years. And 3 years like this, I've been doing this for almost 8 years. That's crazy.
Yeah, and time has flown.
If I would have let that obstacle of like, hey, you're not going to get paid unless, you write, that's fine. Then I would have been maybe still waiting tables. Who knows? But my trajectory would have been where I am now, which now I open up an agency, almost a little over 2 years ago. I got into this so I could put food on the table.
Yeah.
Not to open up an agency.
Right.
So the trajectory, and then, hopefully this keeps snowballing into something bigger that maybe I don't even realize that it's going to evolve into. I think it's pretty cool. But let's go back to you, to AIA. So what, I know that conversation with Emily, she had your back,
mm-hmm.
and she supported you in that. So talk to me a little bit about how important it is to pick your spouse. Like what impact
I think
have.
That's a question that you have to ask Emily, because I think if anyone picked anyone, she picked me. I don't think I picked her. I remember vividly exactly where I met Emily. I had a lunch ticket from school and college to get a sandwich, and I was in line, and I got like tapped on the shoulder by one of her friends. So if I don't go to that lunchroom at that particular time on that particular day after basketball practice, and she's not there eating with her friends, who knows what ends up happening, right? So I think she picked me. But I do think, number one, I do think that if you're trying to do something on an independent basis, right, not to say that you can't do it without a spouse, it is much easier if you have a spouse that is on the same plane as you, right? On the same trajectory, the same mindset. I think that helps a lot, because there are going to be some stressful times that happens. There's going to be challenges that you're going to run into. There's going to be chaos. There's going to be fires that you need to put out. There's all these types of things that happen. So you really need to make sure that you have someone who understands those things and is going to be able to not only help you along the way and do whatever it is that needs to be done, right? Something as simple as just listening or saying, hey, let me help you do this and let me do that, right? So I think those things help alleviate the scenario. But also, aside from the help, I think it allows a person to understand. I think where a lot of, husband and wives have arguments when they come home is like, well, you don't know the day that I had, right? And I think having a spouse that can understand what you're going through and then vice versa, I think it makes everybody say, okay, chill out, right? Because I know what they're going through, because I went through the same thing. I had the same day that they had. So we can come to like a meeting of the minds, right? As opposed to like, being at each other's throats. So I think that's helped us out tremendously. But we've always been like that. I don't know if you know this or not. There's a fun fact. Emily and I have been together longer in life than what we have not been together in life. So we've been together 22 years, and I met her when I was 21. So we complement each other very, very well. She's the emotional part of the relationship, and I'm the analytical part of the relationship. I don't expect her to be analytical. She doesn't expect me to be emotional. We meet in the middle. And we take care of things.
So let's transition. We'll circle back to AIA here in a little bit. But so talk to me a little bit about Orlando, the father, right? Because you have 3 kids. You grew up in a single-parent household where your father was not around. So right off the bat, when you become a father, that creates a handicap because you don't have an example of what a father is supposed to pour into his kids or expect from his kids. Where did you learn that? What did you read? What advice did you take? Who did you seek out to kind of pour into you so you can in turn pour into your kids?
I think being a parent is always an everyday challenge. And I think unless you become a parent and you start to have your kids like in their teenage years, it's very hard for you to appreciate, how you grew up, when you grew up, what you had, what you didn't have. So, and I think this is a thing that we have as well as especially if you grow up from like a single parent household and then now you're in a dual parent household where my kids have both their mom and dad actively present in their lives, right? And sometimes too much in their lives, right? But that's just that's the swing back from how we grew up. We want to give everything that we didn't have to our kids, and sometimes that could be at a disadvantage. But I think parents are always too hard on themselves anyway. It's always like, I wish I could have done this. I wish I could have did that. Being a parent is just learning and making mistakes every day. We are all there's no playbook. As much as we love to read books, and some of them are okay to read, and some of them can help you out and give you a little bit of guidance. But at the end of the day, you're learning as you go. This is a learn as you go job. It changes every day because they're getting older every day. So, I had this, and I had this joke where early in the beginning, we're like, oh man, we can't wait till the kids can start walking, because then they'll be able to take care of themselves. Well, that presented its own dynamic. Now they're breaking things, right? And then it's like, okay, we can't wait for them to start talking. And then they just wouldn't stop talking. And now it's like, now they're walking and talking. We can't wait for them to go to school. And then school presents problems, right? And then it's like, we can't wait for them to finish school so they can be on their own. And now it's like, wait till you get to that point. And there's another level of anxiety unlocked where your kids are going to get their driver's license, and then you see them driving, or you have to teach them how to drive. Like, that's going to be, prepare for that in the next couple of years, because that will happen. And, so parenting is just learning as you go. And there's going to be more challenges as my kids get older. I wish I could tell you there's a playbook or something that I can go off of. I don't beat myself up too much. I can tell you that I'm very strict with my kids, only because I want them to have certain guide points. And I want to make sure that they're like locked in and laser focused. I feel like if I can keep their mind occupied on certain things, it gives them less opportunity to get in trouble, regardless of whatever it is, sports, theater, after school activities, things like that. But I also bring my kids along with me in a lot of the things that we do. And exposure, I think, is one of the biggest things that I yearned for when I was younger. So that's one of the things that I try to use with my kids. My kids go to a lot of our events. I joke with my kids all the time. I go, I just got here at 42 years old, and you're here at 13. Look at what you're able to see at 13. It took me 42 years to see the same thing you're seeing at 13. Imagine what you're going to be able to accomplish. So being a dad or being a parent, that is a trial by as you go. You got to figure it out as you go, because every dynamic presents different challenges. And I wish I could tell you that there's a playbook that you can kind of like read through, but that no one has a playbook, because everybody's kids are different. All I can say is just expose your kids so they can be well-rounded individuals when they get older.
Very good, very good. So let's go back to AIA. So what's something that at this point in time, the 9 states, the hundreds of agents that you have at the moment, what is something that sets you apart from all the other FMOs?
I think one of the things that separates us is, one, we have 3 pieces to AIA where our competitors have maybe 1, 2, but not all of them. So because of that, I think it makes a very interesting conversation for people to sit down and just explore and learn who we are. We're not the biggest. We're not the richest. We're not the largest. We're not the one that has the most tech. We're not any of those things. But what we are at its core is a group of individuals sincerely committed to helping people succeed. That's number one. Everyone from the front desk and the admin to contracting to support to training to myself to Emily, we have a genuine willingness to help our people succeed. I think that's a part that certain FMOs can have, and some of them lack, believe it or not. People know that they can reach out and touch us, and I think that's a very, very good thing to have as an organization. The second part is that we also have technology, and there's a lot of other organizations that have different types of technology. But I do feel like the platform that we have been able to create for our agents helps them at the day-to-day level. It is a platform that a salesperson, that if they could, would make. Remember, I'm a salesperson first. I'm not a coder. And then the third dynamic is that we're always evolving. There are certain larger competitors that we have that have been doing the same thing for the past 10 years. And God bless them. Maybe it's working for them. Maybe they're resistant to change. Maybe they can't change because it caused such an abrupt change for them that they don't want to do it, right? Or they just refuse to, or they don't want to, and they're just fine with where they are. You have to remember that we started at our FMO in change. We were baptized by fire, right? When we started and then COVID hit, right? And then so we knew nothing but just managing chaos. So we've always had to adapt. What we did 5 years ago, I couldn't even tell you some of the stuff that we're doing now. We completely evolved from what we did 5 years ago. What we did 3 years ago, we weren't doing today. So even in 2 years, we wouldn't be doing what we're doing today. So the fact that we're always evolving with the times, we adapt with change, and the fact that we can actually pull different pieces in to make us look different as we evolve and grow, I think that's a component where larger organizations have a hard time pivoting.
So where do you see AIA in the next 10 years?
National.
National.
National with a select group of individuals. Because I've noticed in this industry, you can have a ridiculous amount of brokers on your roster. Either A, you don't service them, you can't service them because of the mass. B, they're not really involved in this industry. So what good is it for them to be on your roster if they're not actually producing, right? And then C, there's a cost to time now. Time is very, very costly. So it's very hard to manage that many people. And then also in addition to that, if they're not going to be producing at the output that they should be producing in for whatever reason, maybe they're doing this part-time, maybe they're doing this part-time. So for us, I mean, granted, if they want to work with us, we're going to try to help them as best we can. But the goal is to be national, to be with a select group of individuals across the entire United States that are primarily focused on this industry, that are knee-deep, that aren't going anywhere, that are completely committed to this industry so that we could be completely committed to them so that we can grow and take ourselves to the next level.
That'd be dope.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't wait for it, man.
Hope I'm around to see that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think you will. Absolutely. Yeah, we weren't in 8 states, years ago. We didn't have platforms. We didn't have tech. There was a time where we had a storage room full of materials. That's gone. Technology has completely changed that.
Yeah,
I like that a lot.
I think you're right about that. So when you were gonna go on this journey to start the FMO, what was the best advice and the worst advice you received?
Worst advice I received was you're not going to make it. And what makes you think that you can open up an FMO with just you and your wife? That was like the worst advice, right, that I can get. The best advice that I received was from Emily, who was basically saying, what's the worst that could happen? Literally, like, what's the worst that could happen? It doesn't work?
Shout out to Miss Ruiz.
What's the worst that could happen?
I love that. So that's great advice, Emily. Great advice.
For sure.
All right, man. So let's wrap up with 2 quick things. If you could go back to your younger self and, going through the trials and tribulations and the environment that you were brought up in, what advice would you give your younger self now? You, Orlando, now, give young Orlando.
Be humble. Be humble. Yeah, I think at a very young age, even into my 20s, even into my 30s, as you get older, you start to mature and develop and things like that. But I always walked around with a chip on my shoulder, and I think that's just because of the way I was raised and the upbringing and how I grew up. But if you could be humble, I think it would have opened up a lot more doors.
Okay, I've known you for quite some time, and you always have crazy sayings.
That is true.
Wisdoms that you always kind of just use, or if somebody's coming at you with a problem and you just don't throw the baby out with bathwater.
Yeah,
Things like that. So if you can impart just a couple of wisdoms for the ones that are going to be watching this that are in a stage in their life where they are going through certain uncertainty and they just kind of don't know where to turn or don't know where to go, what wisdoms would you impart on them?
Well, the first part is like the little one-liners. The little one-liners I have collected over my life. Some of them are mine. Some of them are actually from some of my clients, my former clients. And then some of them I've just kind of like picked up along the way, and they've kind of stuck. And it kind of lightens up the mood a little bit, and it allows like a good icebreaker. But also it allows a person to think in a way, right? So you mentioned don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. So that's a visual thing. You start seeing someone chucking a baby, right? Another one that I told a person last week was, and they looked at me, they go, what? I said, don't ram an elephant through the eye of a needle. And he was like, what? And I was like, don't ram an elephant through an eye of a needle, because he was trying to do so much in such a little window of time. The visual cues that those little things sometimes give you, it brings levity to the situation, and it also helps the person visualize things in a different perspective. But if there was any advice that I would give someone who's starting to come up right now, is if there's anything that I can tell you is, and this is something that I've seen often too that's happening right now with people that are exploring our industry, asking questions about how do I get involved in this industry, and how did you start, and what do you think I should do, is one, don't get in your own way. Stop getting in your own way. The majority of the things that I am seeing now are more self-inflicted than anything else. People are stopping themselves before they're giving themselves a chance to get started. 20 or 30 years ago, it was maybe access to information. Yeah. Maybe you wanted to do something and you couldn't get access to the information. With AI and modeling and all this other stuff, you have it right at your fingertips. Training, learning, visualization, YouTube, all of these things are available to you at a moment's notice. People, there's tons of people that you can learn off of now. That wasn't the case 20 or 30 years ago. So what I see now more than anything else are people getting in their own way. But that's self-inflicted. So if there's any advice that I could give to you, it would be much different than what I would have given you 20 years ago. Today, it's get out of your own way. Stop getting in your own way. Because I think once you move that out, you will see a lot that's in front of you. Sometimes you get too close to the forest, you can't see the trees. See, they just come out. They just come out. Yeah.
Man, well, I want to thank you for your time. You definitely dropped some gems. You gave us a little bit of insight of kind of like how you became this well-rounded individual. Man, I wish you nothing but the best, man.
Thank you, man.
Obviously, I'm along with the ride with you, so
absolutely.
The better you do, the better I do.
Yeah, one of my star guys, man. It's great to see you grow, man, for sure.
I appreciate you. Thanks again for taking the time, man, and thank y'all for tuning in.
Appreciate it.
Please do what it do, and like, subscribe, comment, all that good stuff, and we will see you on the next episode of Blueprints. Take care.